观众朋友们好，现在是美国东部时间3月13日，这里是华尔街网报当日第3期节目。现在我们继续为您带来的是俄乌局势的最新进展。首先来看到的是来自英国金融时报的报道。美国国家安全顾问沙利文警告，如果俄罗斯打击波兰，北约将做出全面回应。此前距离波兰边境大概10英里的乌克兰军事基地遭到袭击，华尔街网报已在第一时间向您汇报。同时，沙利文在接受 CNN 采访时强调，我们正在直接私下的与北京沟通，大规模逃避制裁的努力或者支持俄罗斯的行动绝对会有后果。沙利文并没有详细说北京可能会面临什么样的后果。在今天早些时候，沙利文表示，美国认为中国知道普京在计划一些事情，但是中国可能不了解他们即将执行行动的全部程度。沙利文对 CNN 表示，普京也有可能向中国撒谎，就像他向欧洲人和其他人撒谎一样。而同时，根据来自英国金融时报透露的消息，沙利文将在周一前往罗马，与中国外交政策最高官员杨洁篪进行高级别讨论，预计讨论的重点将是俄罗斯入侵乌克兰的问题。白宫方面随后正式确认，沙利文将率领一个由国家安全委员会和国务院官员组成的代表团，参加自拜登政府去年1月上任以来与杨洁篪的第3次会晤。文章介绍，这次会议是在俄罗斯对乌克兰进行无理残酷战争，以及中国与俄罗斯结盟以推进他们自己世界秩序愿景的背景下进行的。一位熟悉议程的人士这样向《金融时报》表示，他们将讨论俄罗斯的入侵对地球和全球安全的影响。该人士表示，乌克兰的战争肯定会是重要的谈话话题，而中国的官员将直接听取美国国家安全顾问的意见，这十分重要。国家安全委员会的发言人霍恩则表示，沙利文和杨洁篪过去1年中已经会过2次面，除了俄乌局势之外，他们还将讨论如何管理中美之间的竞争。熟悉情况的消息是向《金融时报》透露，罗马会谈是拜登总统和习近平在11月进行虚拟会议的后续会议。同时，这次会议的背景是北京和华盛顿在一系列问题上仍然有巨大分歧。过去1年中，拜登实施的政策基本保持了其前任川普所采取的强硬立场。中国大使馆也确认了有关消息，但是说没有有关于罗马会议的更多信息可以提供。来自《金融时报》的分析认为，这些讨论是在一个关键时机所进行的。华盛顿对于中国与俄罗斯的关系越来越感到震惊，中国拒绝谴责俄罗斯入侵，并将责任归咎于美国和北约，就鲜明地说服了这一点。同时，中国继续坚持认为它是乌克兰冲突的中立方，但是越来越多地支持莫斯科为其行动辩解。本周早些时候，中国外交官和国家媒体呼吁对俄罗斯关于美国支持乌克兰生物战的指控进行全面调查。美国方面一直表示这种说法是荒唐的，并警告说俄罗斯可能准备在乌克兰使用化学武器。同时，北京也重复了莫斯科方面的说法，说近几十年来北约东扩是战争的催化剂，还谴责美国领导的对普京政权的制裁是遏制俄罗斯和中国更大努力的一部分。霍恩表示，沙利文此外还将会见意大利总理德拉吉的高级顾问马蒂奥洛，这是美国努力协调对普京选择战争做出强有力的统一的国际反应的一部分。另外，沙利文在今天早些时候在 CNN、CBS 以及 MSNBC 等多家媒体上接受采访，针对今早些时候俄罗斯对于北约边境附近的基地进行袭击，以及美国记者受袭身亡等事件进行回应。
Getting very close to NATO territory. Is the U.S. policy that any strike into Polish territory or airspace, intentional or unintentional, is an attack on NATO?
The president has been clear repeatedly that the United States will work with our allies to defend every inch of NATO territory, and that means every inch. And if there is a military attack on NATO territory, it would cause the invocation of Article 5, and we would bring the full force of the NATO alliance to bear in responding to it.
But, Jake, I want to start with that strike on the military training base that Clarissa was just talking about near Lviv, the western side of Ukraine, just 11 miles from the border with Poland. What does that tell you about Putin's strategy, and how worried are you about this strike coming so close to a NATO territory?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Dana. We've been warning since well before this invasion got underway in February that the plans for this invasion involved Russia attacking all over Ukraine, southern Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, and yes, western Ukraine. So this does not come as a surprise to the American intelligence and national security community. What it shows is that Vladimir Putin is frustrated by the fact that his forces are not making the kind of progress that he thought that they would make against major cities, including Kyiv, that he is expanding the number of targets, that he is lashing out, and that he is trying to cause damage in every part of the country. What President Biden has made clear from the beginning is that we will not have U.S. military forces operating in Ukraine, and there are none operating there now, but we will defend every inch of NATO territory, even as we seek to provide military assistance to the Ukrainian fighters who are bravely defending their homes and bravely defending their cities.
And let's talk about any effort for diplomacy here. Vladimir Putin talked with the German and French presidents for more than an hour yesterday. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is reportedly telling Zelensky to make a deal. What are you hearing and seeing? Is there any diplomatic solution in sight?
Well, we have been in close contact with the Ukrainians. President Biden spoke with President Zelensky just a couple of days ago. He speaks to him on a regular basis to get updates on what is an ongoing communication between Ukrainian negotiators and Russian negotiators. That is the negotiation that matters, because ultimately it is Ukraine that will have to make its own sovereign decisions about the shape of any diplomacy going forward. From the United States' perspective, we're here to stay in touch with all the key players, as you mentioned, the French, the Germans, the Israelis, others, but ultimately to support the Ukrainians. And as things stand right now, Vladimir Putin does not look like he is prepared to stop the onslaught. And so we will continue to escalate the pressure against him and continue to support the Ukrainians as they fight to defend their territory.
The other major development of the week was this warning from Western intelligence that Russia was preparing perhaps to use chemical or biological weapons. The president used the phrase severe price in reaction to what would happen if Russia did this. He said they'd pay a severe price. I assume these economic sanctions are a severe price. Can you define what that phrase means?
I'm not going to, in public, lay out the specifics of the severe consequences that Russia would face were it to actually use chemical or biological weapons inside Ukraine. I will just say that the United States, in coordination with our allies and partners, is prepared to impose such severe consequences. And we have communicated that directly to the Russians. We have consulted with our allies and partners about it, and we are prepared for that eventuality. And part of the reason, Chuck, that we're so concerned that this may happen is that when Russia starts accusing other countries of potentially doing something, it's a good tell that they may be on the cusp of doing it themselves. What we're here to do is to deny them the capacity to have a false flag operation, to blame this on the Ukrainians or on us, to take away their pretext, and to make the world understand that if chemical weapons are used in Ukraine, it is the Russians who will have used them, and the response will, as the president said, be severe.
None of the sanctions you've imposed so far have stopped Putin. So is there any red line for the administration here in terms of humanitarian catastrophe that would change the president's calculus? Is this a game changer?
The use of weapons of mass destruction would be a shocking additional line that Putin is crossing in terms of his assault on international law and international norms, his assault on the human rights and human dignity of the people of Ukraine. But bottom line, Margaret, the premise of your question, which is, well, sanctions haven't stopped Putin, so are they not working? I think we have to look at this in two respects. One is, have we imposed severe costs on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine? And the answer is yes. And the second is, have we been able to help the Ukrainians defend themselves against these attacks, to push back Russian forces from being able to take major cities, including the capital city, Kyiv? And the answer to that is yes as well. And part of the reason why Putin is resorting to the possibility of extreme tactics like the use of chemical weapons is because he's frustrated, because his forces aren't advancing.
You said, Jake, there are reports of white phosphorus being used in Ukraine, reports of chlorine gas. How imminent is a chemical weapons attack in Ukraine?
We can't predict a time or place. All we can say is that there is an escalating level of rhetoric on the Russian side trying to accuse the Ukrainians and the United States of potentially using chemical or biological weapons. And that's a tell, Margaret. That's an indicator that, in fact, the Russians are getting ready to do it and try and pin the blame elsewhere. And nobody should fall for that. That is why we've gone out so decisively at the United Nations Security Council and elsewhere to rob the Russians of the capacity to pin this on anyone other than themselves. And as the president said on Friday, if in fact the Russians do use chemical weapons in Ukraine, they will pay a severe price.
There are a lot of developments to get through with you. I do want to ask you about these reports that U.S. journalists have been killed in Ukraine by Russian forces. Do we know what the consequence would be for Russia killing an American?
Well, this is obviously shocking and horrifying, and I've just learned about it as I came onto air here, so I will be consulting with my colleagues, we'll be consulting with the Ukrainians to determine how this happened and then to measure and execute appropriate consequences as a result of it.
Tell me, please, what is your name?
Juan.
Juan? Where are you from?
The U.S.
Yes. What happened to you?
We crossed the first bridge in Irpin. We were going to film other refugees leaving, and we got into a car. Somebody offered to take us to the other bridge, and we crossed a checkpoint, and they started shooting at us. So the driver turned around, and they kept shooting. It's two of us. My friend is Brent Renault, and he's been shot and left behind.
And how is he?
I don't know.
You don't know. You don't know what happened to him.
I saw him being shot in the neck, and we got split, and I got pulled into the.
And who brought you here?
An ambulance. I don't know.
About an hour ago, a journalist arrived here at the Kiev hospital. He was injured. He told us that he was shot at a Russian checkpoint at the Irpin bridge. He was with a colleague. He told us that he was with a colleague, and the colleague lied down on the street because he was shot at the neck.